let's get into it. We're actually, we are honored to bring on Batya Ungar-Sargon. She is the Deputy Opinion Editor at Newsweek and also the author of the upcoming book. You're going to hate me because I forgot already.
Bad news! How woke media is undermining democracy.
How is it undermining democracy?
Because I argue that the mainstream national media has abandoned the working class and
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
What's going on, Habibis? I'm Siraj Hashmi.
I'm Mujahed Kobbe.
And we're the Habibi Bros. Welcome to another episode of Habibi Power Hour. Jay, how you doing?
Wonderful. How's your week been?
Wonderful. Oh, it's been great. I have been, this is the first book I've read all year, and it's only the second month of the year. And it's crazy because I'm illiterate. I'm actually very excited.
I taught myself how to read for this book.
Just for this book? Wonderful.
For this book. So I Googled Noam Chomsky. Is it Chomsky?
Chomsky.
Chomsky. Noam Chomsky. Yes.
Sounds like a Super Mario. Sounds like a Super Mario Brothers character, you know? Chomsky.
Chomsky. Yeah. It's that ball, that chomping ball.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking. Maybe that was the inspiration. Maybe that was the inspiration that our guest this evening needed, because we've had her on before, and she is the Deputy Opinion Editor at Newsweek. She is also the author of, forgot it again, Jay. What's the name of it? No, maybe we can have our guest join us and tell us what's it called again.
It's called Bad News: How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy.
Batya Ungar-Sargon, everyone. You can find her on Twitter at Bungar-Sargon.
That's right.
Sargon.
Guys, thank you for having me back. It's so good to be here.
It's so great to have you. And under better circumstances as well. The last time we had you on, it was the week of the Afghanistan withdrawal, and tensions were high.
Yeah, I'm amazed that I've been invited back, not just because of that, but also because I accidentally and unintentionally totally roasted you, Siraj.
No, those are always welcome and very intentional. I think Allah, there's a surah in the Quran that says that those closest to God shit on Siraj Hashmi. Ameen.
Okay, now I'm having a tough time remembering exactly how you roasted me.
Oh my God, that's great. You know what? Moving right along. Anyway, news of the week. Let's do the.
Okay, well, I'm so glad you're here, because
see, look at Mujahed, because he remembers and he's desperate to share it, but I'm just gonna filibuster.
This is why we need the filibusters, to prevent Batya from humiliating me a second time. Jay, what did she say?
So, Batya, the last time you were on, it was right before you published your book and everything. So, how's your experience been so far? Like, how has people reacted to the book? Have there been any like surprise reactions to it?
I was really surprised and really grateful to be invited onto CNN by Brian Stelter. So I now can't let anybody insult him around me because he did me such a huge solid. And I mean, honestly, I should have said no just on those grounds alone. But so that was really surprising because my book is very, very harsh on CNN. So I feel still super grateful to him for that. I'm really, really heartened to see that the book has, it's been sort of, people on the left and people on the right have been enjoying it. So Oh no. Oh God.
Have I ever told you one of my favorite movies was Spawn?
Spawn.
Have you ever seen Spawn? That's the clown from Spawn, and I made a comment that Brian Stelter.
Oh God, why did I say his name?
No worries. We can cut that out or make that as our promo.
No, that's going to be the promo.
That's going to be the promo.
No, I feel like moving on.
I gotta say, Batya, you have some very good clips that you post on Twitter, and with very good captions. Just from a marketing standpoint, I appreciate it and I admire it. And
thank you.
I just want to say, teach me your ways because I suck at it. I'm King Boomer over here.
Here's the key, okay? You have to, this is key for writing op-eds as well. You both have written for me. You should both write for me more. But anybody watching, this is the key to writing an op-ed. You have to think about like who the person that you want to own with this op-ed is, and then like try to be just like a little bit kind to them. Like think about convincing them instead of owning them. Like that's the thought process, is like the energy of the thing should come from that desire to own your enemies. But then you should take that next step, which Siraj, by the way, I see you do all the time, and say, you know what, I'm going to have kindness for this person, even if they were not kind to me. Take that urge to own and turn it into something with a little bit of compassion. That helps you think like the person you're trying to convince. That's how I think about it.
So, okay, I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jay, I mean, that's exemplified by the fact you've been banned from Twitter at least 14 times now, right? Are you on your 15th account?
This is my 15th account.
That's right.
But this one's been around for a while. You're kind of slipping, no?
Well, it's also because I'm now insulting with Arabic words, so they don't get tagged.
Nice.
They don't like gendered insults. So like if you use bitch or slut or whore or anything like that, if Brian Stelter, like he did in the past, reports my tweet, it gets banned automatically.
He was put on notice. Jay was put on notice just this past week. They limited some of your account features. So
they did. I don't remember what it was for.
Well, do they give you like a timeout punishment? Like you can only... Wow.
Yeah, for 12 hours. So the only people that could see my tweets are my followers, and that's it.
Okay. So what does Kaaba mean? Is that a very bad word?
So Gahba, it's Gah. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you can say that.
I can say that, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's Gahba. Yeah. So Gahba is more of a Khalij, like the Gulf Khaliji region of saying either whore or bitch. So it just depends on how you're saying it. So
because those are two very different words with very different meanings.
They are, but that's the way it works. And it's the same thing with sharmuta. Sharmuta is also bitch or whore. Yeah. But that's a more Lebanese, Palestinian, Jordanian way of saying it is sharmuta.
I've always used sharmuta. It wasn't until I met Jay that I started using gahba.
It's a little easier to say,
but in Urdu,
it hits a little bit harder.
In Urdu, the word for bitch is kutta.
Kutta.
So
kutta.
You want to call someone a son of a bitch? You call kutta kabacha.
Wow.
Kutta kabacha.
Yeah.
Kutta kabacha.
Now,
Siraj, jaldi
karo. Also,
jaldi karo.
So let's talk about bad news, which I'm illiterate, Batya.
What does that mean? You clearly can read.
I read the shit out of this book.
Oh.
And I loved everything about it, because the one question that I kept asking myself was, why isn't Batya right wing already?
Oh my God. I get asked that all the time. I don't even get asked that. People just say to me, like, you can say whatever you want about yourself, but people on the left and the right say that to me, but you're no lefty. Yeah.
No, I mean, but like you basically unpack how the news industry, the journalism industry got to the way it is today, and you do a really good job of going back in time and getting it to the beginning where there was this news competition between newspapers, the New York World, the Sun, and then eventually the New York Times. And I'm not going to lie to you. I never went to school for journalism. I'm not even a good journalist.
That's not true.
That's why
mean,
he is jobless for over 2 years. So...
I've been unemployed.
Wait, isn't this a job?
What?
Isn't this a job? No.
I guess they say do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I get on camera, drink, and talk shit about the news. I guess you can't call it a job.
I mean, that's probably what everybody at CNN is doing, right? So
yeah. Drinking. We'll get to that shortly. So, but just to give people, when we initially talked about it on the last episode that we had you on in August, you specifically highlighted how a lot of these newsrooms were channeling a certain ideology within leftism to cater not specifically towards working class Americans, but specifically for the highly educated elite.
Yeah.
And while Jay asked you, some of the surprise responses that you've gotten, was there anything that you feel like if you were to write it or publish it with a few months remaining, or the last few months that we've had, would there be anything that you would change about it?
Like things I would add to it or things I would take out of it?
Yeah. What would you change about it? Because it's easy to just say this is a pretty cutting critique of the media. You hear media criticism all the time, but it's very rare that you go back into the actual history to unpack why it got that way. And I think it seems as if just in the last week or so, or just in the last 6 months since we saw you, the media has gone to a point where it's gone to a point where they've already leaned into being woke and lying to people. They've done that for years on end, and sensationalism. What have we learned in the last 6 months about the media, especially in 1 year into the Biden administration?
Yeah, it's such a great question. First of all, I can't believe you actually read the book. Thank you so much. Like most people who interview you have not actually read the book, so that's so kind of you. So I think so many things, it's like every week there's a news story that plays into the argument I made in the book. So for example, the Kyle Rittenhouse story, it's like a perfect example of this, right? They took a kid who had went perhaps, not wisely, had a friend buy a gun, took that gun to protect businesses because Black Lives Matter rioters were burning them down. And then he, shot 3 people who were attacking him. We all knew this because we all saw the videos, right? Then it turned out that the 3 people who had attacked him, 2 of whom he killed, one was a pedophile, one was a domestic abuser, and one had punched his grandmother 2 weeks before this happened, right? So it's is it an accident that the 3 people who attacked this kid were all people with a history of attacking vulnerable people, right? Of course not. It seemed like such an open shut case. And the media really went out of its way to try to cast him as not just a white supremacist, but, somebody who specifically went to a Black Lives Matter protest to kill Black people. One news outlet, I think The Independent, actually said that he killed Black people, but most of the outlets, they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to be so rankly false. They just gave the impression, right, by repeating over and over, cross state lines to go to a Black Lives Matter protest, right, to give that impression. And that was exactly what was the thesis of my book, is that we use race and a moral panic around race to disguise class dynamics. And what they were doing there was disguising the fact that a working class kid went to defend small businesses from a movement that had become violent and was being protected by liberal white elites because it made them feel good about themselves. And the media literally did that. Like the argument I make is that they call people racist to avoid talking about class. And that's exactly what happened there. It's exactly what happened with the Jussie Smollett story, where you had liberals who could not wait to talk about and they couldn't stop talking about this fake hate crime when actual liberal cities are being torn apart by real crime, and nobody in the liberal media will talk about it because it makes them uncomfortable to talk about crimes that are committed by people of color. This whole thing with CNN imploding, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, because Jeff Zucker was literally behind the scenes advising Andrew Cuomo in order to get a sweetheart exclusive deal to have Cuomo go on CNN, all the while masquerading as CNN being an objective outlet. Like that's all every single one of those episodes would have made a great chapter in the book. So it's like, yeah, it stopped, right? But it's like, it's ongoing. Just the liberal media beclowning itself in order to avoid talking about the real problems in America by talking about these invented problems.
Let's talk about that now, actually, because that's actually a really great segue into that discussion. You know, Jay and I talked about it last week, and I think Jeff Zucker resigned the day that we had our last episode.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like a, great timing. But the initial thought I had was, you had those CNN producers who were fired for, I'm sorry, not just fired, but arrested for charges of pedophilia and possession of child sex materials. Do you think Jeff Zucker knew anything about that? I know it's kind of like, hold on, where is it?
It's a little time for
a little bit of that.
Our legal team said that when we are accusing people of such things, the best thing to do is make yourself look as crazy as possible. So
exactly.
Do you think Jeff Zucker would order pizza to his producers? Yes or no?
Okay, here's where I stand on this. I think the things they have done are so bad that we don't have to invent like new crimes. I'm sure they didn't know about this pedophile, like I feel pretty sure that, they didn't know about that, because how bad do they look now having had this person there? So I feel pretty confident about that. I could be wrong, but, it seems to me, but I think, again, it's like, with Chris Cuomo, they in the end, they fired him over something ridiculous, right? A sort of trumped up anonymous Me Too charge from a decade earlier when he was working at a totally different network, right? Mm-hmm. When and Siraj, actually, you wrote a great piece for me about how Andrew Cuomo was taken down for the wrong thing, right? He was taken down over these Me Too allegations. And you actually wrote, like, it does nothing to minimize them, to say that his crimes vis-a-vis the seniors was so much worse and nobody cared about it. And I feel a little bit that way with Chris Cuomo. Like, the crimes that CNN should have fired him for was that sort of the lying about COVID. Do you guys remember the whole performance of him emerging from the basement when he had like not been quarantining? He had been like with COVID, like screaming at his neighbors and going everywhere and so forth. So I would say one needn't accuse them of like literal pedophilia to say like the crimes against the American people, just losing total credibility. And you saw last week, it came out that Fox News is getting more Democratic viewers than CNN and MSNBC combined. And mm-hmm. Tucker Carlson, who they, the big bugbear of the left, is the third most watched show by Democrats, right? So they really deserve everything that they're getting here.
Okay, but what if it was about the pedophilia?
Like, what if they were really ordering pizza to their producers?
I feel like something has to do a little bit with that, and I'm blurry again, but it's okay.
Wait, let me talk. Okay, I'll say this. This is potentially controversial. Yeah, put them on.
Yeah, I'm back.
Wait,
All right, we're protected now.
You need a hat too. Yeah, there we go.
Okay. So you had this whole like Pizzagate conspiracy, right? About how the Democrats are all like, pedophiles and blah, blah, blah. And, Hillary Clinton has a dungeon full of like Christian babies or whatever. obviously conspiracy theory, obviously crazy. At the same time, though, I mean, I think so. I think that version of it was nuts. But at the same time, Jeffrey Epstein, who was a pedophile, was literally in bed with a lot of these massive major characters in the Democratic Party, right? So like, it's like there was a crazy version of it spreading online, but there was a true version of it. Just make sure this stays put so everybody knows that I'm in crazy mode. But there was a true version of that hiding just beneath the surface. It was kind of like in the 80s when there was this moral panic about the satanic worship where they were accusing kids playing Dungeons and Dragons in their mom's basements of being like, you know, pedophiles and doing these satanic rituals, right? That wasn't true. But, the Catholic Church was overrun with pedophiles who were literally doing that, right? So it's like behind the conspiracy theory, sometimes there's a...
There's a little snippet of truth sometimes.
A version of it, happening somewhere.
So,
oh God, I'm totally gonna get canceled for saying that. Ungar-Sargon comes out in support of Pizzagate.
I mean, if this is what brings you to the IDW, welcome, Habibi. Welcome, Habibi. There was actually a passage in your book that really, I don't know why it left a mark on me, but I had this realization that when I read it, I was like, that makes so much sense. Oh. And it was in your chapter, A Great Awakening, when you basically write, and I quote, "No one can claim ignorance of the rampant inequality ravaging America today. But what the mainstreaming of the anti-racist ideology has done is to relieve liberals of the burden of actually doing anything about it. After all, if the root of inequality lies in something as immutable as your whiteness, rather than any economic or political decision you have control over, you can't do anything about it but feel guilty."
Yeah, and we know how much liberals love to feel guilty.
Yeah, I mean, that is basically what the credo about liberalism today is, that it's not about doing anything. And so long as you feel bad, you can basically get away with any injustice at this point.
Yeah, I mean, something that became clear to me while I was writing the book, and I'm curious what you guys think about this, because not everybody agrees with me about this, but like, we have a problem in this country with how we treat Black people specifically. There's still like 4 areas in American life that they're not given equal shakes. There's a problem with police brutality, not with cops killing Black people. They kill poor people of all color, but pulling them over more, laying hands on them more, insulting them more. All of this is like really problematic. We have a problem with criminal justice where there are a lot of unconstitutional things happening there. Young Black men do not get the same fair shakes as, rich white men. We have a segregated public school system, especially in liberal cities. And then we have intergenerational poverty, and I would say between 20 and 30% of descendants of slaves. So there's 4 like really specific areas that we're still struggling to make good to one community that we have abandoned over and over and over again since enslaving them, many years ago. Instead of dealing with these 4 issues, what they've decided to do is to like pathologize whiteness. Like, the problem is not with white people. The problem is with how we treat one specific non-white group. And like, the idea that, America is a white supremacy is like, it lets them off the hook, ironically, for actually dealing with those 4 problems. Because if we are like a white supremacy, and if every person is inherently evil because of their whiteness, and you can't change your whiteness, you don't actually have to solve any problems, because you can't, because it's baked into the DNA and you can't change your DNA, right? So it like relieves them of having to actually do anything. And it's so funny because they take this like charge of racism, which is very bad, and then they apply it to all sorts of random things, like believing you should police the border, and what ends up happening is like people in the Black community are like, you're asking me to now care about like undocumented immigrants, like, but they're using the like unearned valor of like the struggle for equal rights for Black people in order to get clout for all of these other issues that are just not the same, and I anti-Semitism is another example. Like, all these people pushing this intersectional view and being like, look, it's all related: anti-Semitism, anti-Blackness, anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ. It's not related.
It's like that.
Are not related. Yeah.
It's like that whole episode with Ilhan Omar when they were trying to condemn her. It's all about the Benjamins tweet. And they're like, oh, we're not going to condemn Ilhan Omar because that's Islamophobic. So we're going to just condemn all forms of bigotry in this House resolution. Jay, I cut you off. What were we going to say?
No, I mean, I agree with those 4 issues, but I think there's also a huge issue in liberal media where they don't want to talk about the issues that also plague a lot of the Black community, a lot of the inner city relationships and stuff like that. Like, for example, one thing I think really needs to be talked about is like, single motherhood. Nobody talks about it whatsoever.
Totally.
Nobody. If you even mention
not just single motherhood, Jay, the destruction of the Black family.
Well, that too. And like, even if you want to mention it, the single motherhood in America with the Black community outweighs every other race that's out there, but nobody wants to talk about it like it's an issue that maybe there needs to be a real conversation about. Because when you want to talk about inequality, I think the biggest inequality you can give a person is to be born in a single parenthood. Once you're born in a single parenthood, you're already starting in equal world because you don't have the support of two people. But nobody wants to talk about it. They don't want to talk about the crime that's in inner cities. They don't want to talk about like the biggest contributor to the deaths of young Black men or other Black men, because like you were saying, they're too busy saying, we're just inherently racist. We can't talk about these issues because we're not Black. We can't talk about them. So why should we talk about them? But they don't have anyone who's talking about these issues and being the messenger for these communities within these networks. Nobody is talking about it. And it's the same thing. Nobody's talking about, generations of slavery and how that makes them unequal in life. Nobody's talking about police brutality and how like the crime rate in the Black community is the way it is. Nobody is talking about the real issues that matter because they're too busy trying to make themselves look morally superior to everybody else by saying, I'm white, I'm the real problem, I'm this, I'm that, they're always talking about themselves. And it does, and it completely ignores the rest of the real situations out there.
I will say, I totally agree with you, but I feel also a little bit like, where are the Republicans? Like, this is the moment to show up. Vaccine mandates, Black people hate them. Rising crime, Black people hates it. Public schools, not working. I feel like a Republican that showed up in an inner city and said, I'm going to run on school choice and law and order. I'm going to get your kid into a great school and make sure that they don't get shot on the way there. Like, that would be such a winning agenda. And they just don't show up. Like, they've totally ceded the ground to the Democrats. So, they love to go on Fox and talk about how the stupid wokes like don't really care about the Black community. Totally true. But where are you? Like, show up. Like, it bothers me a lot.
Oh yeah, and I think it's like you were saying before. Everyone plays to their base, so the media plays to their rich liberal base, and then Republicans play to their base where they think the working class don't care about those issues, but the working class consists. The majority of them are people of color, white people, Asians. Everybody is working class. So when you want to bring these issues, you're bringing them to the whole class themselves, because it's not only Black people that suffer from crime and all these issues. It's the working class in general.
Totally.
So like you were saying, if they bring it into it, but it's just they don't show up. They don't.
Yeah.
No politicians really do, and that's the issue with them. And then the thing I loved about your book also is when you were saying what journalism was and how it became, as big as it was, especially from Day, is wanting to just show the working class that their issues and their problems and all of that kind of stuff is heard and they matter. But we're not seeing that now. We don't.
Totally. And, people ask me a lot, like, why do you think they're embracing this woke stuff, as opposed to like actually doing the work? So I feel like there's a version of me that believes that, you know, look, they're lining their pockets with the proceeds, right? Like if you say that it's racist to believe there should be a national border, like who benefits from that? It's like rich liberals who employ, you know, 50% of illegal immigrants as domestic labor. It's rich liberals who want to go out for a great meal and pay $200 instead of $800. It's rich liberals who want to buy an amazing bottle of wine for $15, you know, like they're the ones who are like benefiting from this mission creep of racism. But, you know, when I take this off, I remember that, you know, these people do truly believe that they are, you know, bending the moral arc towards justice. And I try to keep that in mind, you know, even when I'm criticizing them. Like, I'll give you guys an example because I'm so curious what you think about this. So you remember when AOC went to the Met Gala and she was wearing that dress and said tax the rich on the back, right? And it was like,
how could we forget?
Right. It was such a perfect example of this. Like I said at the time, if she had done that before I wrote the book, I wouldn't have had to write it because it was such a perfect example of what I'm talking about, which is like saying tax the rich was literally her entree into the upper echelons of celebrity culture, right? Like she acted like that message was somehow revolutionary, but all of those rich liberals they like just, yeah, tax me. They don't care. They don't care paying higher taxes because paying higher taxes keeps them above the poor who rely on their beneficence, right? Like they don't care. They're happy to pay more taxes because it doesn't actually threaten their position, right? Like they're never going to pay so many taxes. They won't still be so much richer than everybody else. So she went there acting like this is a revolutionary act when actually that message was like her very ticket of entree into this celebrity, you know, Twitterati crowd, whatever. It was actually like real celebrity crowd, right? So it was like, you know, she got like eviscerated by the left as well as the right. But then it seemed so cynical. But then 2 days later, Vogue magazine released a video. Did you guys see this video? They had filmed it. So I just saw it. So they had filmed it while she was getting ready. So they had accompanied her throughout the day of the Met Gala, like to the makeup appointment and the hair appointment and the dress fitting and the this and the that. And like you could see in her face, like how genuine she was, like how much she believed that she was about to do the most revolutionary thing that a working class girl from the Bronx could ever do, which is show up at this Met Gala with this $2,000 dress, you know, that says tax the rich, right? Like she really, 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 really believed it. Like you could see that. And there was something really heartbreaking about that. Like to see her after the fact when she was like in damage control mode, like doing all these super defensive, like Instagram posts, like trying to backtrack. And then that video came out and it was like, oh, she was so genuine and had no idea what was coming. You know, it was like this after the, anyway, it was like, it reminded me like they believe it. Yeah.
Images before disaster.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
That.
Yeah.
I think that's what she stated, that like everybody wants to sleep with her. That's why they criticize her, because everybody wants to sleep with her. And I'm like, not with that ass. But
I mean, come on, she's very good looking. In fact, a Republican like 2 days ago was on TV saying, it was so funny. He was proving her point. He was like, if she was like a middle-aged woman, nobody would care what she had to say. And it was like, it's kind of proving her point.
I mean, I would care if she had more of, you know, my desirables, but she doesn't hold them. Yes. So it's that whole act. And that's what it is. Like, to me, when they don't cover, oh God.
Oh no.
One of my favorite things
never
was,
bring up AOC or Brian Stelter.
On Habibi Bros, don't. No, my favorite thing is there was a media reporter on NBC because Tucker Carlson used the same image, and the guy accused Tucker Carlson of using those googly eyes on that photo, and then he was like, "Oh shit! Actually, that's a real photo of her." They didn't Photoshop googly eyes.
Yeah, the googly eyes. Yeah.
The funny thing is, she is like, if she were a Republican, like she would be proof that the American dream is alive and well. Like she is proof that if you're beautiful and brilliant, like you will be making $200,000 a year before you're 30, right? Like she's so I don't even believe that the meritocracy is working, but like she is like an example of something I have to contend with, because clearly like something is working. If like someone beautiful and smart enough, they will always rise to the top. Like this is actually like a great country if you have those kinds of talents. It's just the real question is what happens to everybody else. But it's just so funny to hear someone who clearly has benefited from that meritocratic rise like railing against it.
Yeah, Batya, you write about these immutable characteristics like race, yet you never write about the immutable characteristics of being hot.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think beautiful people, like they're like, it's like a race of its own, right? Like,
I mean, right there, our queen.
Absolute.
We do not deserve.
She won't come on. She hasn't.
No. Literally every single time we get on our knees and say, Jen Rubin, please come on Habibi Power Hour. We're begging you. We have another queen with us who shares your faith as well. I assume. I can't really.
I don't know. Wait,
I'm not sure
I don't
if
know.
you're part of the same
you guys.
denomination.
I don't know. I don't think she is. But
I don't think Jen is Orthodox.
Is she Jewish?
Her last name is Rubin.
That's a dead giveaway, right?
Yeah. Well, Whoopi Goldberg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Whoopi Goldberg's Jewish, right? And she's also not
anti-Semitic. Whoopi Goldberg was Jewish until like last week. I didn't realize she wasn't. Who would ever doubt a name like that?
Yeah. If Jen Rubin is,
she is Jewish.
What's that, Spencer? She is
Jewish.
Wait, who?
Jen Rubin, not Queen, not Whoopie. Jen Rubin.
Oh, the Queen. Okay, sorry. I thought you were saying that Whoopi Goldberg was Jewish. I was like, Spencer, you're coming in here fact checking us. I was just gonna say that if Jennifer Rubin wasn't Jewish and she chose Jennifer Rubin as her stage name, I would be very disappointed.
Well, I was gonna make a bad joke. I want to ask you guys what you thought about the Whoopi Goldberg thing.
Okay. All right. So Whoopi Goldberg saying the N-word, terrible. She should never have said it.
Never. That is the worst thing I've ever. I can't believe
this is the marquee.
Where does she come off?
Spotify needs to cancel her deal right now.
Absolutely, completely. But I mean, Whoopi Goldberg, the thing that disheartens me is she's not the only one that believes a lot of that about the Holocaust and about Jewish people, in terms of seeing it as white on white crime, as she was saying it. Like she white on white crimed the Holocaust.
Well, I want to get the exact quote again.
She all lives mattered it.
Yeah,
she did all lives matter.
Yeah, because the way she was saying it was white people and white people. So it wasn't about race. It was about the crimes of humanity, of man against man. Like right. I understand like what she was trying to say, but I think there is, and I honestly think they get away with it a lot, is that there's a lot of anti-Semitism within the Black community that people don't want to talk about. They don't want to mention it. There's a lot of racism within the Black community against other people that people don't want to talk about, especially because of trying to change the terms of what racism is and how to deal with racism. I mean, the ADL, they came out with it, and then they had to backtrack it. It was so bad. It really was, because so bad, I understand where they're trying to say what racism is and all that kind of stuff for sure, but that's not what it is. You're talking about something completely different than what racism is. Every race can be racist against another race. But when you're talking about there are some inequalities within a country due to race, that doesn't give them justification to be racist themselves. And I feel like it's empowered a lot of these people to have that, to feel like they can just say whatever they want about white people, say whatever they want about Jewish people, say whatever they want about Asians, because of this hierarchy of oppression. The darker your skin, the more oppressed you are. And I feel like it's a very misguided way to see the world.
Batya, I have a question for you that's completely off the beaten path, but sort of tied into exactly what we're talking about. Because you have comments coming from Whoopi Goldberg about the Holocaust. Are you afraid that someone's going to 1619 Project the Holocaust?
Whoa.
I'm 100% serious. Why are people laughing?
No, that's a really good question.
I mean, they're doing it in Poland, right? But I don't think they would do that here. Like, so Jay, this is where I feel like on the one hand, everything you said was so righteous, but also, okay, I'm still a lefty, and so there's a part of me that sort of rebels at the idea of, like Jews are in more of a privileged position than the Black community. Like thinking of where the communities are at and how America has treated them. And so there is something in me that a little bit rebels at the idea of like, there's a part of me whenever these, Black celebs step in it and then they have to bend the knee and apologize. Like there's something in me that maybe it's like, residual wokeness or whatever, but I don't like it. And
right. But
yeah.
Is Whoopi Goldberg more privileged than you are?
Right, exactly. So she's like a millionaire, right? She's fine.
She's a woman of me. She'll be
okay.
Okay, so here's what I think what she said was very bad, and it was good that she apologized. I don't think she should be. I hope she doesn't get fired. I didn't think she should be suspended. I thought it was good that she apologized. Everything.
Right.
I do think that there is a legitimate argument hiding in her very poorly articulated, historically false commentary. I think there is a version of what she was trying to say. That's what I was saying earlier, which is that all of these other groups are trying to claim that they are victims of racism in America, but there's one group that's really victims of racism in America, and the rest of you are stealing valor from that struggle. And like, I think that if she had said, like, the problem was she was talking about the past and she was just totally wrong about Hitler, but if she was trying to say that, like, that's an argument worth having. Like, when Jews go out there and say like, oh yeah, we know how you feel because there's still anti-Semitism, it's like, get out of here. Like, you cannot compare. Yeah, anti-Semitism still exists. It's still on the rise. We are the luckiest Jews to ever walk planet Earth, hands down. And like, yeah, we should address it when we see it. We should try to fight anti-Semitism wherever it is. But to act like we are some sort of like oppressed group in America, I think is ridiculous.
Right. And
yeah, there was sorry, Jay, you can go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, go for it.
Well, I was just gonna highlight there was a tweet made by Gad Saad. Are you familiar with him?
I am.
He tweeted just the other day something along the lines of, I don't actually know if he left it up, but it was one of those things where he tweeted about how, in response to the whole Joe Rogan controversy and him using the N-word, which apparently was, or at least according to Joe and many of his defenders, that he used it in the context of quoting other people using it, and it wasn't him specifically. And then you have obviously the Planet of the Apes comment, which is obviously completely inexcusable and reprehensible, and that's obviously not something.
Although he apologized for it in the same episode. Yeah,
he did. So Gad Saad tweeted out, Jews have been the most exterminated. I actually can share it. Let me share it because I actually have it. Let's see how boomer I can be. He tweeted out, let me zoom in right here. Jews have been the most persecuted people in history. They were nearly exterminated. I escaped persecution in Lebanon because I'm Jewish, and yet I don't wilt away at hearing some idiot use anti-Semitic words. I'm not a fragile flower. Enough with the hysteria around the N-word.
Oh, that's not a good tweet.
Yeah, and when I hear that, I think to myself,
no, bad tweet.
What gives him
totally.
right to say, all right, get over it. Your feelings, don't, you're dismissing feelings. Why, how?
It's bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
That was bad. I wouldn't have gone there. I first of all, like, if somebody said the K word, like, I would be offended. And I think it's totally
Kobe. Kobe's not an offensive word. Kobe
is offensive.
No, it's also
to every man who has a mom.
But it's also code to like, I'm gonna eat your mom's ass. I'm gonna Kobe you. I'm gonna Kobe you, and you're gonna fucking like it.
I love how we get off track by, very serious discussion.
No, okay, Godson, that was a bad tweet. First of all, yes, you don't get to tell another group like how offended to feel about something. I think more, a better thing is that we ran an op-ed by somebody in the UFC. Is that what it's called? The UFC? Is that
Ultimate
the thing
Fight.
that Joe Rogan has?
Oh yeah.
UFC. Yeah.
UFC, so, Ultimate Fighting.
Yes. So a black fighter.
I thought you were naming an Arab country for a second.
Yeah, I was like, the UAE. You mean the
No, I'm so bad with sports. All the acronyms just like fly together for me. So this black fighter from Spokane, and it was like, I don't need white people to, the headline was literally, I don't need white people to tell me what I'm supposed to be offended by. Like, he is a person who has credibility to say, look, he shouldn't have used it, but I'm not offended. He apologized, moving on, right? Like, that's not for somebody else to say. And you see like a lot of these, like, a lot of these anti-Zionist commentators who are often, chiming in to tell Jews like, oh, this isn't anti-Semitism. It's like, who asked you? Like, nobody cares what you think it is, So, I told you, I think that's a really insensitive tweet. Like, it's, I stood up for Joe Rogan, but I wouldn't tell, like, because I'm taking, the temperature, saying, okay, are people feeling offended by it? Like, we can say that there's no difference, that there is a difference between quoting somebody who said the N-word and using it as a slur or an insult, or using it yourself, without being like, nobody should be offended by this.
Right.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's pretty stunning to see how the hits that Joe Rogan seems to be taking right now seem to almost never see, it never seems to be about like the actual incident itself. It's almost always about like the bigger picture, like what forces are working at play. Joe Rogan has an immense platform, one of the biggest influencers in the podcast sphere. Why is it that he's taking the hits? What's really happening behind the scenes? And I guess, Batya, what's really happening behind the scenes?
Well, it's all in the book. So you have to take the book and put the hat on the book, because this whole thing is explained in my book, like why they're coming for Joe Rogan. Exactly. Because it's all about class, they can't stand. Look, this is what's happening with Joe Rogan, okay? The liberal elites in the media believe that they should have like a completely zombified audience who does whatever they say and listens to them and obeys what they say, even though they have huge amounts of contempt for working class Americans and middle class Americans. They still believe that those people should obey everything they say. And they are losing credibility and hemorrhaging viewers, because obviously people who you have contempt for are not going to listen to you. Joe Rogan has the opposite model. He is in a relationship with his listeners who he has respect for, enough respect to air people he disagrees with, people from across the spectrum, ask them questions, and let his listeners decide for themselves. He doesn't dictate to his listeners. He allows them to make up their own minds. But the liberal elites who believe they should have the right to dictate to the people they have contempt for what to do and are upset that they don't have that power, they look at Rogan's 10 million listeners and they project onto him their fantasy of what they think they're owed. And so they imagine that his listeners are obeying everything he says, even though he says all the time, don't obey what I do. I'm not anti-vax. Everyone should make up their own minds. Do what's good for you. And it's like the liberals imagine that people are sitting there being like, oh, maybe I'll get the vaccine today. And then they hear a Joe Rogan episode and they're like, what? I cannot. The master has said I must not get vaccinated, because that's what they want them to do to them, right? They want them to be like, I was going to take my mask off, but CNN said no. And so now I'll keep wearing it. It's this whole like weird envy wrapped up with projection, wrapped up with their own fantasies of what they are owed.
And what they believe they are in in society. They believe that they are the masters of information. They believe they bring on people that are supposed to tell you what to do, even though now we're seeing people. I mean, they're saying things now that would get you off of Twitter, off of Spotify, off of YouTube, off of all of these platforms for saying just 3 months ago. Like, for example, like masks, like cloth masks don't work. Like, you know,
I'm sorry. All I heard was Jay saying. Sorry, all I heard was Jay saying he would get me off.
I will.
I
will.
More,
you and me in Dallas. I'll show you. And it's just amazing to me because you have these people that literally came on, these experts that came on that said that, you know, you're a grandma killer, that you can't take your kids to the park. You know, kids have to be masked 8 hours a day. And now they're all reversing their fucking tune. And they're like, the science changed and all this type of stuff. But misinformation is only coming from Joe Rogan. And people, to me, you have to be smarter to play people as a fool. And they're not that smart. They're not smart enough. Like Brian Stelter and all of these other people that they bring on as experts are not smart enough to play the rest of us as fools. And they're doing a really bad job about it.
Yeah. The gaslighting is just out of control, you know, like not once has any of them said, look, we got this wrong and you all got it right. And now we've realized it. They just act like, oh, there's new science. There's new information. It's like, there is no new information. There's midterms coming and Americans are sick of this.
That's exactly what it is. I mean, I honestly believe the the internal polling has been so shit that you have all of, like, you had Ted, what's his name? Ted Lieu? Ted Lieu? Ted
Lieu.
He's coming up and saying, like, look at all of these things. Now we can unmask. All this type of stuff is not working. You know, all of these issues that people were demonized for saying just 6 months ago or 8 months ago. And
I have to also apologize for something I said last time along these lines of like conservatives being right about things. So on the whole withdrawal from Afghanistan, a lot of information has come to light, and I'm not just gaslighting, like new information has come to light, but I will say that the new information that has come to light very much vindicated you all's point of view. And I turned out to have been disastrously wrong about this. I'm still very anti-war. I'm still glad that we withdrew, but the failures of the Biden administration have become like really, really, really glaringly obvious. And I was very wrong, and you guys were right even before there was a paper trail. So I just want to acknowledge that here.
And honestly, that takes a lot bigger balls than me and Siraj has.
Combined. In fact, Batya,
I'm not even
I have
joking.
to say, I'm actually worried now about my own ego because Batya's balls are just mammothly bigger than both of ours.
Combined, because it takes a lot. I mean, there's not a lot of people that will come out and say like those things, and like the way that they should about COVID and about masking, and especially like the thing I'm very like passionate about is the way they're treating kids.
Oh my God, totally.
Because like the New York governor was like, we're going to end all masking, but kids should stay masked. Why?
Do you know that
Stacey Abrams?
Totally.
And then then you have Stacey Abrams going to a school where everyone's wearing a mask except for her.
Do you know that 75% of Black children cannot go to a museum in New York? Because they're not vaccinated. Like, what kind of a society is this to where Black people can't go to restaurants and museums anymore? Like, how do you call yourself a liberal or a lefty and you be on that side of this divide? It's just so wrong.
It really is, because it's bowing to teachers unions, because teachers unions don't want them to be unmasked. They don't want to go work. They don't want to go do these things. Like to me, there's unions have their place and everything, but when they dictate stuff, because the product of teachers, the product of schools is the education provided to students. The product is not the safety or the well-being of teachers. It's the safety and well-being and the education of students. That's where I think teachers unions are completely off base on why they should be protected, on what the issues they should be running, and I feel the same way about police unions as well, because the product of police unions is rightful law, the protection of the public, all that kind of stuff. Not protecting bad police, not protecting bad teachers, not in issuing more harm on the public or kids. And I think like when you change your viewship on what they're supposed to be protecting, you see them for what they are. And it's just a money grab. It's giving politicians, they funnel a shitload of money to politicians. And I think it's just not producing what they should be producing. So demolish police and teachers unions is my message. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I have a friend who has a disabled daughter, and she requires a lot of speech therapy, and they make her wear this goddamn mask all day for 8 hours. She comes home and it's slicked to her face because it's covered in her spit and sweat and dirt, and she's so miserable. They've seen so much backsliding. All of the kids who had disabilities who were kept out of school. I mean, I know families with severely autistic children. Their lifeline is those schools, and those schools shut down, and they just saw this backsliding of their children who they rely so much on every single advancement. And it's just heartbreaking. I mean, when you think about who is like the most vulnerable, I really feel like this COVID, I mean, we saw the largest transfer of wealth from the middle and working class to the billionaires that we've ever seen in American history. It's just unforgivable.
It's like you can't go to these small businesses, but you can go to Costco.
It's disgusting.
You can go to Target.
You can. Yeah, you gotta go to Costco.
It's just insane. It really was. Yeah. They closed it down so hard that you couldn't even order from these places. You couldn't even go to takeout.
Batya, can I say one thing? Jay's a secret lib because he complains about California endlessly, yet he never leaves.
Hey, we just bought a house here. Like, there's a lot. I love the weather here.
Proof that he's actually a secret lib.
It reminds me a lot of Lebanon. The weather here reminds me a lot of Lebanon. You got the mountains.
Oh, you're saying anti-Semitic in California too?
I'm gonna start a Hezbollah party right here in California.
That makes sense.
Why do you stay? Why don't you leave?
What the shit?
It's a small, I'm planting the seed. It's going to happen sooner or later. And the biggest issue is of course, how much they tax.
Yeah.
They tax us out the ass. And and I love the ass, but there's nothing to show for it. There really isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember a couple of years ago around 3 or 4 years ago, going to UCLA because they had the administrators who were in charge of homelessness in Los Angeles County speaking there, and they were raving on, we spent $2 billion, we had all this money and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, then why did homelessness raise by 15% while you guys are taking billions of dollars?
Totally.
Where is this money going? Why is this happening? Like, none of this stuff is making any sense that you're able to do this. Why is your administrator making 6 figures? Like, this doesn't make sense to me that you're stealing my money to make this better for you to line your pockets, because that's exactly what it looks like. And honestly, it's probably what it is. So like these policies, and one thing we're going back to schools is in 2021 or 2020, there was like on average in the United States, there was $20,000 spent per student in public schools. imagine a family of 4 was able to have that $80,000 in their bank account and what they could do for their kids compared to not going to school, not being social, having to wear masks that impugn, education. Imagine what these families could do, especially a single Black mother of 4. What could she do with $80,000 compared to what we just sank into the system?
Now, before we go back behind the paywall, Batya, where, just to kind of quickly focus on your book, if you were to sort of summarize how everything got to the way it was for those who are interested in reading about it, what would you say is your elevator pitch to those to basically check out your work?
So if anybody is curious about why the media got woke, like why that happened, exactly when it happened, what caused it, that's what my book is about. It explains why it happened. And I argue that it was just the latest stage of journalists abandoning the working class in order to push a culture war that benefits them economically. That sounds interesting. There's a lot of good stuff in that book for you. Talks about.
And I swear by this book. It's actually really, if you really want to know where things went off the rails, it is a very good read. I can't read as well. I have really bad ADHD in addition to being illiterate. And I read this book in 2 days. So if I could do it, so can you. And for those of you who want to follow Batya on Twitter, she's at
Ungar-Sargon.
Ungar-Sargon.
Buns.
Ungar-Sargon.
I like buns. Let's do it.
So if you want to stick around and watch the rest of this episode for bonus content, go hit us up and subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Habibi Bros. We're going to get into some spicier content in just a moment, right after this. So Batya, stick around with us. We'll be right back.